Hey gang, it's me, Mr. Cassidy, and my old bud, Mr. Bones here, with another episode of Science Vids. Today we're talking about the deep sea. The deep sea. We got an anglerfish over here, anglerfish from Finding Nemo fame. Got a creepy little jelly there, and this is a dead whale that's fallen to the bottom of the ocean in complete darkness. And there's all these octopuses and fish consuming it over years and years. Whoa, we'll check that out a little bit later. But first, what are we even talking about? We're talking about this portion of the ocean down here, where it's super dark, the twilight zone, the midnight zone, the abyss. Um, but up at the top we have the sunlight zone, where sunlight is hitting the ocean. There's all these plants and animals that live there, plankton, zooplankton. Those are teeny little animals, or zooplankton. Zoo means animals, like a zoo where animals live. You have zooplankton, and then you have phytoplankton, and those are microscopic little plants, and they live up here in the sunlight zone. Lots of fish and other ocean animals eat those plankton, and there's a lot of life at the surface of the ocean. But as you go deeper, there's less life. There's less critters, but the critters are really interesting and really cool, and we're going to talk about some of those creatures today. Now, get this: there are more humans that have been to space, more humans that have been to outer space than have been to these deep water zones. How crazy is that? So, in a way, we know more about space than we do our own deep water oceans. And we find out new things every time we send a submarine down there to collect data and critters and stuff like that. We are always discovering new species that we haven't seen before on almost every single trip we take down to the deep ocean. So that's pretty cool. And here's just some images of plankton. Plankton are super beautiful. These are animals up here. These are zooplankton, teeny little shrimps and micro jellies before they grow a little bit bigger. Some stay that small, but a lot of these are just baby jellies and baby crabs and shrimp that are eventually going to get bigger. These are plants. These really cool geometric shapes are microscopic little plants that photosynthesize. How cool is that? It's very cool. Um, okay, here's another little cross section of the world's oceans. Sunlight zone at the top, twilight zone, dark zone, abyss. And yeah, the sunlight only goes a couple hundred feet, and then it gets super dark and creepy pretty quick. And here is an ocean floor map. So if you were to drain all the water out of the ocean, this is what it would look like down there. If you were in the South Pole, this is Antarctica here, South Pole, and look at it's surrounded by all these mountains, these ridges that run for thousands and thousands of miles, and these underwater islands and stuff like that. And here's this big peninsula that starts off as ice, as a big glacier, and then it just like plunges into the ocean, but it keeps going. It's still this like giant fin of ice that just disappears into the water, and it keeps going. And here's some canyons, underwater canyons. It's like a very dynamic landscape that to us just looks totally flat because we just see flat water ocean. But down under that water is all these really cool features and mountains and valleys and stuff. And here's basically a world map. Here's this ridge that's just thousands of miles long between Africa and South America, North America, the Mid Atlantic Ridge. And we've got one in the Pacific also. Kind of goes along our coast, and then it juts out in the middle of the ocean down there around South America. I just love this map. Look at this giant canyon up here between Greenland and northern Canada. What is going on? Okay, here's the deepest part of the ocean, the Mariana Trench, 36,000 feet below sea level, 7 miles deep. So, okay, the tallest mountain in the world is Mount Everest. It's 28,000 feet tall. Okay, so it's like 5 miles up into the sky from the sea level. This Mariana Trench is another almost 10,000 feet, uh, but deep to go straight down. All that distance you had to travel up to climb Mount Everest, you got to do the exact opposite of that, plus another 10,000 feet to get to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. Only two people have ever been there, both rich dudes that just built super bomber submarines and took them down to see what was down there, and they took a bunch of pictures, and yeah, pretty freaky down there. No, thank you. And this is something we've talked about before. This is the Bering Land Bridge. Whoops. This is the place that all these animals came across from Asia into North America. Woolly mammoth, bison, grizzly bears all crossed this bridge that was exposed during the Ice Age. So basically, I mean, this is all buried now. There's still some islands out there in Alaska, the Aleutians, the Aleutian Islands. But these days, this land bridge is all underwater. But during the Ice Age, so much of the world's ocean water was trapped up in these giant ice sheets, in these giant glaciers. And so the ocean level got lower and lower and lower as the world got colder and colder, and all that water was trapped in ice. And so essentially, the water level of the world's oceans just dropped so much that this giant bridge was exposed between Asia and Alaska. And these animals could just cruise across, easy peasy. And that's where the first humans came into North America. That's the theory, at least, is via this land bridge. They just walked across, followed the mammoths and the grizzly bears and stuff. Okay, how do we know what these oceans look like? Basically, we use bat and dolphin technology. We use sonar. So what sonar is, and this is how bats and dolphins hunt. They send out these sound waves, basically. Bats and dolphins send them out of their head, and it creates this map in their brains, and it tells them where food is. And we map the oceans in the same way. We're cruising along in these ships. We've got this gadget on the bottom of the ocean. It shoots out sound waves. The sound waves hit the bottom, come back up. The amount of time that sound wave takes to travel from the boat to the bottom corresponds to a depth, to a distance. And so we cruise along, just taking all these different little distances, and we smash all that data together, and it gives us this map where, say, this blue color is a little bit deeper than this orange color, which is a little bit deeper than this red color. And we just cruise along, collecting all this data, and eventually we have this big, beautiful picture of what the world's oceans look like. And here's what it looks like off our west coast. Here's Neah Bay. If you keep going, it's pretty shallow. It's this big shelf, but after a couple hundred miles, you get these big canyons that drain down into this really deep water a couple hundred miles offshore there. I thought I'd throw that in there just so you could envision what it looks like out there. Okay, we're going to be spending a lot of time in the Monterey Bay Trench today, because the Monterey Bay Trench is a place we know kind of a lot about because it's so close to the mainland. Here's where we live, up Port Angeles. Go south a little bit, there's San Francisco, Monterey Bay, it's right there. Boop, hop in your submersible submarine, boop, 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 and here's this giant canyon that starts basically right from the mainland. And so the Monterey Bay Aquarium sends this deep water submersible down into this canyon a lot, and is always finding new critters there. And it's a pretty accessible deep water canyon. You don't have to travel too far to get to. Okay, and here's what one of these submersibles look like. This one is a type that has humans in it, and the humans are driving it, and they got controls that operate this little robotic arm that comes out and can grab animals or grab different samples, plants, whatever. There's some that are just purely remotely operated by people up in the ship, and they've got the controls up there, and it's sending signals down to a robot basically, and it's cruising around the deep water, checking stuff out. Okay, we got an active deep sea volcano here. Check this puppy out. Boom. This is deep under the ocean. A volcano is erupting. Now, these are small little volcanoes, but they're kind of always going off and spewing up lava that immediately cools and becomes rock. And so it's making new earth actively all the time. These volcanoes are always happening Kaboom. Yeah, I thought that was cool. And here's a little cartoon showing that. Here's this big magma chamber is what it's called. It's a bunch of magma or lava deep in the beneath the ocean. It gets it's pressurized and heat rises and it gets pushed up and it comes through these cracks in the ocean floor. And that's what we just saw. This super hot lava coming up in the ocean floor, getting cold really fast, and basically becoming rock. And that's what's going on along all this long ridge. Just these giant chains of lava of volcanoes. Super cool. Okay, now sometimes just hot water events erupts from some of these vents. It's not lava. It's just water that's down in the rocks, deep in the earth, and it's getting pushed up, finds its way through the cracks, and erupts into the ocean. Now, there's all kinds of animals that live around these hydrothermal vents, is what they're called. These hot water vents, and the first one of these was discovered in 1977, and this was a huge deal because before this discovery, scientists thought that all life on Earth, all life, needed sunlight at some point. You know, everything ate something that eventually you traced it back, and it was a plant that grew from sunlight. Um, Plants were like at the bottom of the food chain, essentially, or plankton. If we're talking about the ocean, and everything depended on sunlight in order for these big food chains to operate. But in 1977, one of these deep water submersibles discovered a hydrothermal vent, and there was all these critters down, existing deep down in the deep dark water where sunlight never comes. Instead, this hot mineral-rich water, this water that had all these different compounds in it, um, provided life for all these different critters. There was these worms, these feather duster worms that were living down there, and these shrimp, and these octopus, and these weird pink creepy fish. And this is another worm, and crabs and stuff. And none of them needed sunlight to live. They all lived around these hydrothermal vents in these little communities where hot water was coming up out of these cracks in the ocean floor. Very cool. And here's a little vid of what these hydrothermal vents look like.
As the ROV descends, we start to see this plume of black smoke.
Okay.
And we're like, yes, we found it.
There it is.
And then this huge chimney comes into view, and it's just packed with giant tube worms. Everybody.
Okay, so you see how the water was all kind of wavy there? That's because that water is so hot, it's hitting that cold water of the existing ocean, and it makes it all kind of makes it all wavy and stuff. Um, and so, yeah, basically all those structures and stuff are built from just the minerals, these little microscopic little rock-like particles that just keep building on top of each other. And then worms create these weird little tube cases that they live in, and these little structures just keep growing. And they build these strange little island communities in the middle of nowhere down deep in the ocean. Pretty wild stuff. Uh-oh. Next slide.
As the ROV descends, we...
Mr. Bones, what do we do? There we go. Okay, creatures of the deep. Oh, I forgot to put deep in there. Okay, creatures of the deep. We got the piglet squid. So cute. Look at this thing. It's a little teeny squid. Deep sea party balloon. I'm not kidding you. That's what this thing is called. The deep sea party balloon. Dumbo octopus. I guess it kind of looks like Dumbo, the elephant with those big ears. The goblin shark. Oh my gosh. No thank you. No thank you. Too scary. Vampire squid. Very cool creature. We got a little video of that guy coming up. And the Yeti crab. Look at that big furry Yeti crab. Just like the abominable snowman got those big furry claws. Now notice how most of these creatures are like, don't have any color. They're see-through. The vampire squid is kind of red. But besides that, like these are pretty boring looking animals in terms of coloration. And that's because they live down in the deep. They don't need color. There is no color. It's just blackness. And so yeah, most creatures that live down in the twilight zone or the abyss are are translucent or clear or don't have any color. Okay, here's an anglerfish. This is a fish that was in the movie Finding Nemo. Do you remember this part when Dory and Nemo are cruising around down deep at night, and this little light, they're checking out this little light, and then it's this giant fish with huge jaws and gigantic eyes. It's a little bit exaggerated. This is what they really look like. They still have really big eyes. They still have really big teeth. But yeah, basically, there's this bioluminescent bacteria. I mean, okay, this bacteria that lives into this weird like horn that's growing out of this fish, and this bacteria lights up, and little teeny fish and little shrimp are interested in that light. They're like, "What's going on over here? I'm going to check this out." And the anglerfish senses that there's a little fish or a little prey item nearby him, and then it opens up its big jaws and lights out, curtains, baby. And that's how it catches its food. And yeah, apparently 90% of open ocean organisms, so critters that live out in the deep waters, 90% of them produce light of some kind. They have bioluminescence of some kind. Maybe it's a bacteria that lives in their flesh. Maybe it's some other way that they make that light. Pretty wild. I don't quite get it. Okay, here is a vampire squid. I just had to show this video. These things are so
By
wild.
the web, the cirri push them toward the mouth. When Vampiroteuthis is startled, it curls its web and arms around the rest of its body, which drastically changes its shape and appearance, perhaps fooling a predator into thinking it is something else.
Whoa.
When it really wants to move, Vampiroteuthis uses jet propulsion, fin flapping, and web pulses to speed away from danger. Vampiroteuthis is just one of millions of species that live in the deep ocean, most of whom have never been seen or described by any human. By the web,
Okay,
cirri push them
look at that giant eyeball. A lot of critters that live in the deep ocean have giant eyeballs. Okay, here's another squid. This is a really huge squid. That vampire squid is pretty big. You know, it's a couple feet tall. This squid is much bigger. Called the giant squid.
Okay, I think we're at the end of the tether.
Giant eyeball.
880. He's leaving. He's leaving. He's leaving. Oh, it's leaving. Oh. Go away.
Okay.
After 23 minutes, the close encounter is over.
Okay, so that squid right there was like 30 feet long. Okay, so one of its tentacles is basically like from the door to the class all the way to Miss Bowman's desk. I mean, these things are freakishly huge. And for a long time, nobody had ever seen a giant squid. They just see like one tentacle washed up on the beach or something. It'd be like, yeah, 15 feet long. They're like, how big is this thing? And now that we have submarines and stuff, we are getting some footage of these creatures, and they're so huge. Okay, so what eats a giant squid? I mean, what could possibly eat something that big with the big scary tentacles and all those suckers? Cachalot whale. These big giant whales that have these big giant teeth, and when we see these whales, sometimes in the wild, there's like these sucker scars all over their bodies, and they think that's from when they're like eating these squid. The squid's flailing around and like attacking them, trying to save its life, and it's like scarring up the whale on its face and body, just like in this drawing. And sometimes it just eats like a tentacle or two tentacles, and the squid like continues to live. But yeah, just these epic battles that no one's ever seen, but we know happen. And so here's this drawing of one. And these whales are super cool. This is them sleeping. They sleep just straight up like that. These things can dive about a mile deep, more than a mile deep, and stay underwater for more than an hour. And they're down there hunting these giant squids. And these whales, We don't know much about them actually. We just recently started figuring out where they winter and where they breed and stuff, and so we're finding more out about them these days, which is really exciting. But they basically generate these sound pulses in these giant heads that they have that they shoot out and they think stun the squid, and basically like they might kill the squid with these big jarring sound blasts, but they think that they kind of hunt. And again, they're using sonar. They're like mapping out the ocean as they're like swimming around, trying to figure out where prey is because they're down deep where there's no light. But they think that they could actually kill human beings that happen to be swimming with them in the water, because they generate such powerful sound bursts, and they use their head and they like funnel it through their nasal cavity, and it's really wild stuff. We still don't really understand how it works, but essentially, it's the loudest sound that an animal produces on the face of the planet, and they use it to hunt. How about that? Okay, here we are with we're looping back to the beginning. Here's these bone-eating worms feeding on the
When
flesh
they fall to the bottom, they can sustain
of this whale.
entire ecosystems for years.
Just think the amount of calories in a
So
whale
these-
here. I mean, the equivalent of so much marine snow. It's hard to even compare.
Oh, look
you know?
at the blubber on the right side.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah,
even
that's
digested all the way.
That's one of the 31 scientists aboard the exploration vessel Nautilus, a ship that explores the seafloor. In the fall of 2019, the crew came across this baleen whale, more than 3,000 meters down.
Whoa.
And by the time they arrived, it was overrun with octopuses.
Okay, so that whale died, dropped about 2 miles down deep into the dark ocean, landed on the bottom, and then it's just feeding all these octopuses and fish and sharks and bone-eating worms for years and years and years. They're eating this giant, massive whale. Pretty epic. Pretty epic.
When they fall.
Okay, that's it. Thanks for watching, wolves. And does anybody know why I put orcas here instead of the typical wolves? That's right, because orcas are known as the wolves of the sea. And since we had a ocean-themed science vid, I thought I'd use orca whales instead of wolf pack. So there it is. Hope you enjoyed Deep Sea Science Vid. Tune in next time. Bye, everybody.